Good morning, everyone. Good to see people in person. So I'm Jose Mario Capo-Chichi, coming from the beautiful city of Toronto, and I'm a lab director at the SureSeq Myeloid Cancer Center. So a couple of years back, we teamed up with OGT and we came up with this pan-myeloid DNA hybrid capture-based NGS panel for standard of care testing of patients with hematologic malignancies that we're seeing at our institution. And I'm just trying to play with my mouse here, just making sure that you can see it. Can you? Probably not. All right. Sorry. So, you know, you may recognize some of your favorite genes on this slide. And as you know, myeloid genes are involve as multiple single nucleotide variants, including insertion, deletions, and duplications. But when we were designing this panel, we realized that there was one gene that was going to pose certain challenges due to the nature of the genetic alteration that it involves. And this gene is the KMT2A gene. So KMT2A stands for lysine methyltransferase 2, also formerly known as myeloid lymphoid or mixed lineage leukemia. And KMT2A is very well notoriously known for its involvement in various rearrangements with multiple fusion partners known to date. KMT2A also involves more cryptic type of mutations such as pattern tandem duplications that are more obscure to the public eye. So KMT2A or MLL rearrangements are seen in multiple types of acute leukemias, including AML, MPAL, and ALL. Generally speaking, about 5 to 10% of adult AML patients have a KMT2A rearrangement, but KMT2A rearrangements are more frequent in pediatric cases. In addition to KMT2A rearrangement, KMT2A also have a smaller cryptic duplication, intragenic cryptic duplication called KMT2A partial tandem duplication or KMT2A PTDs. And unlike KMT2A rearrangement, those KMT2A PTDs are not amenable to classical cytogenetics. KMT2A PTDs occur in 3 to 10% of AML and MDS patients, and there seems to be a co-occurrence of KMT2A PTDs in about 25% of AML patients that also have a trisomy 11. And just like KMT2A rearrangement, KMT2A PTDs is also associated with a poorer prognosis in AML. Now, KMT2A PTDs originates from recombination events between allele elements, such as the one that occur within intron 1 and intron 9 of the KMT2A gene, leading to a duplication of exon 3 to 9, or you will also hear exon 2 to 10, depending on, like the KMT2A exon numbering has changed. And then, so this is the most common KMT2A PTD encountered. Generally speaking, KMT2A PTDs will maintain the N-terminus end of the gene up to exon 9 or 10. And of note, the same exons are also preserved in KMT2A rearrangement, suggesting that those exons are critical for KMT2A's role in leukemogenesis, and that similarly to KMT2A rearrangements, KMT2A PTDs also operate under the same gain-of-function model. So KMT2A PTDs, such as the common one that involves exon 3 to 9 or 2 to 10, are typically too small to be detected by FISH and too large for identification using amplicon-based NGS. So with OGT, we were using a capture-based NGS protocol with probes covering all the entire coding regions of the KMT2A gene, which allowed us to infer the presence of a partial tandem duplication by calculating the relative ratio of commonly duplicated KMT2A exons, such as exon 4, over non-duplicated KMT2A exons, such as exon 27. There have also been MLPA probes that were developed for KMT2A PTD analysis using a similar approach to NGS, with KMT2A PTD specific probes in exon 4 and control probes in exon 36. Now, in addition to those probes, MLPA also allows the detection of trisomy 11 with the use of additional probes that are located in 11q24. Another way to detect KMT2A PTDs is using optical genomic mapping, and this technology takes advantage of high resolution structural variant analysis and therefore allow the detection of both KMT2A PTDs and trisomy 11. So one way to investigate the presence of a KMT2A PTD is just simply by visualizing gene exon coverage. As shown here for 2 AML patients, as you can see, those 2 patients have similar coverage of exon 2 to 10. But if you were to look at the rest of the remainder of the KMT2A gene, you can see that the patient 2 on the bottom has a lower coverage of exon 11 to 27 as compared to exon 2 to 10. And in fact, exon 11 and 27 in this patient were less well covered, have a lower coverage compared to the patient on the top. So those observations are compatible with the presence of duplications with a KMT2A PTD in exon 2 to 11 in the patient on the bottom. Obviously, to arrive to this type of conclusion, you need to have a pretty good and uniform coverage across the KMT2A coding region, which we have here. In fact, we took advantage of the good coverage that we had across the coding region of the KMT2A gene to develop a lab-based algorithm to streamline KMT2A PTD detection. And then we were using the relative coverage of the different KMT2A exons, so the commonly duplicated KMT2A exons, so 2 to 10, over exon 27 and 36, which are more at other end of the gene. And this is what the results look like. As expected, individuals that have a relative mean coverage around 1 will not have a KMT2A PTD, so absence of partial tandem duplication. In our experience, individuals that tend to have a mean coverage with 2 standard deviation tend to have a partial tandem duplication. But we always have the odd cases that sit right at the 2 standard deviation. And we'll see later, but those are cases that are more suspicious for other type of genetic rearrangement going on that do not involve a PTD per se. So in parallel, we were also working with OGT to develop a PTD calling algorithm that was later on added to the OGT variant analysis software. And then so today, if you were to use OGT's analysis software, variant analysis software, you should be able to detect and visualize the presence of KMT2A PTD. The software also provides you with a relative ratio for exon coverage and the confidence ratio and the confidence value associated to it. Another interesting feature of OGT software is that it allows you to quantify the presence of the number of reads that actually harbor the KMT2A PTD. So first, we sought to use NGS and then compare the performance of those 2 KMT2A detecting methods, so our in-house method and OGT software, for the analysis of, and so we screened close to 600 de novo AML patients. And in cases that were KMT2A PTD positive, we sought to confirm the presence of a PTD using other alternative approaches such as optical genomic mapping and MLPA. So MLPA kind of uses a 4-probe system to detect the presence of a PTD, with a KMT2A control probe in exon 36, a PTD detection probe in exon 4, and 2 additional probes on 11q24 that helps with the determination of the trisomy states. So if you were to compile the result in this individual, he has 2 copies of exon 36, 3 copies of exon 4, and 2 copies on 11q24. And these are compatible with a KMT2A PTD, but a diploid state because you don't have 3 copies of the other control probes. And those are the results obtained for the same patient using optical genomic mapping. So here what we're doing, what you can see is that you have a duplication of the markers in this region of KMT2A as compared to the reference genome. And this duplication actually occurs in the canonical region of KMT2A, so exon 2 to 10. And then so those findings are also compatible with a PTD of exon 2 to 10. And of interest, OGM didn't detect any trisomy in this individual either. So first we realized that OGT software was calling more KMT2A PTDs than we identify using our in-house algorithm. And it seems that those KMT2A calls, PTD calls, were false positives. Some of them were false positive as we were not able to confirm the presence of a PTD using other alternative approaches. And then so in looking more carefully at the data, we realized that, so those are the KMT2A PTD positive calls that were made. We realized that the false positive calls tend to have a confidence ratio somewhere around 1.7 to 1.8. So there seems to be some background noise that may be associated with those false positive calls being made. So one way to address this situation was to set up, like a PTD detection threshold somewhere around 1.8. And in doing so, we were able to have 100% confidence between the calls that were made by OGT software and our in-house algorithm. But we still identified some false positive calls made by NGS, this time by both algorithms, so our in-house algorithm and OGT software. So here's an example with a patient that has a PTD call made with a value at the two standard deviation, and OGT software is also called a PTD positive with a ratio at 1.86. However, when we looked at optical genomic mapping, what we realized is that this patient had a rather complex karyotype with multiple structural variants, with some of them located on chromosome 11. And in fact, what we realized is that in this particular patient, those false positive PTD calls were due to the presence of a KMT2A translocation as confirmed by the KMT2A break-apart probes. And of interest, MLPA did not identify any KMT2A PTD in this patient either, just supporting the findings by optical genomic mapping. So that's one way to lead to false positive calls using NGS. Mind you that NGS, because we were losing the relative coverage ratio. We also identify a second patient that also had a median score, the standard deviation higher than 2, so PTD positive by NGS using our in-house algorithm. OGT software also confirmed that suggested the presence of a PTD in this patient with a ratio around 2.33. However, using optical genomic mapping, what we realized is that this patient had a structural variant involving chromosome 10 and 11. In this particular patient, the false positive calls by NGS were due to a deletion in the 5' region of KMT2A combined with cryptic insertion of MLL T10 in the 3' region of this gene. So again, playing with the overall coverage within that region. And MLPA also supported the 5' deletion in this patient. So this particular KMT2A MLL-T10 fusion have been reported in the past, and it's known to be oncogenic. I'm just pointing out here that there are other type of KMT2A rearrangement, and then one could possibly imagine that such rearrangement will also fail detection by NGS. Using NGS, though, we identified a lot of interesting KMT2A PTDs that are still under investigation at the moment. So here's an example with a patient that had a PTD involving exon 2 to 10. You can appreciate the fact that the ratio obtained for this PTD is particularly high, somewhere around higher than 6. And OGT's ratio was also among the highest observed in this particular patient. So PTD positive as well by OGT software. MLPA and optical genomic mapping also confirm the presence of a PTD in this individual. So all 4 methods are concordant in this case. But when you look at the size of the PTD identified in this patient, so typically PTDs involving exon 2 to 10 are around 32 kb. But this patient seemed to have a PTD that was larger, somewhere around 43 kb. So the combination with this larger PTD size and the higher ratio, PTD ratio obtained, suggested the presence of a more complex PTD within this individual. And then more and more evidence now using optical genomic mapping and next generation sequencing, suggesting that the more complex PTDs that may be happening with intragenic duplication within the PTD region. And I believe that that's what's happening in this particular patient. So a good finding by OGT, good finding by using NGS in this case. Using NGS, we also identify what we call at the moment PTDs of uncertain significance because those are non-canonical PTDs, so to speak. And in here you can have an example. You can see the patient that has, in this case, a PTD involving 2 exons. So the remainder of the PTD exons are below our cutoff, where you have a higher coverage for those particular exons. And these findings were also confirmed by OGT software. And in this case, MLPA failed to identify the presence of the PTD because MLPA's control, PTD's probes is located in exon 4 that wasn't involved in this particular partial tandem duplication. So this is, a discordant result of false negative by MLPA. And optical genomic mapping also confirmed the presence of a PTD in this sample. Just highlighting that the PTD observed in this particular patient is smaller than typically seen in the canonical PTD involving exon 2 to 10, which is also compatible with a smaller PTD in this particular patient. Now, is this PTD oncogenic? This is what we're looking at the moment. There's evidence suggesting that exon 2 and 3 are particularly important for KMT2A activity. So these exons are kind of encode for the AT hook domain that is important for KMT2A's binding to its gene targets. And actually, those 2 exons, these particular domains is maintained in various KMT2A rearrangement, and there's functional evidence showing that the presence of this exon is required for leukemogenesis. So we believe that those findings are actually real and that they're meaningful and that they may help change clinical management of patients as well. So this is a summary of our comparative analysis using NGS, so both our in-house approach and in OGT software. We also use optical genomic mapping, as I mentioned. And what we saw here is that we had about 84% of concordant call between all 4 approaches. In 2 of those patients, we had false positive, including the KMT2A translocation and the cryptic insertion, 1110 insertion. We also identify a couple of interesting PTDs that are currently under investigation. I should also highlight this KMT2A PTDs that was not detected by using MLPA. So this is our current workflow for our leukemia patients, our seen at our institution. So we're performing G-banding in fish and NGS myeloid in parallel. But we're thinking of, my colleague Adam Smith is working toward implementing the use of optical genomic mapping into our workflow. And so currently, we are moving forward and we're going to implement the use of NGS for KMT2A PTD detection. And then we'll be using both our in-house approach as well as OGT's method in parallel. In our experience, we had 100% of concordance between those two methods after adjusting our parameters. And then so in case of concording results between those two approaches, the negative result will be reported as such, so absence of KMT2A PTDs. If KMT2A PTDs were detected by both approaches, I think we will be referring to, we will rule out the presence of any confounding abnormality on chromosome 11. And one way to do this is to use higher resolution structural variant analysis. So we definitely need to take other cytogenetic findings in consideration. And this will allow us to rule out the presence of confounding abnormalities on chromosome 11. And we know that in about 84% of the cases analyzed so far, this will be true. So, then we also need to take in consideration other limitation of NGS. And so we may, in some cases, identify false positive. And so depending on the location of those abnormalities on chromosome 11, we will have to report those results either as inconclusive or negative. In the future, we're thinking of, we're working, so at the moment, we haven't identified any discordant calls between our two NGS calling algorithms. But if we were to identify such discordant call, we will also resolve to high resolution structural variant analysis to resolve them. So just the take-home message from this pilot study. I hope I was able to show you that, KMT2A PTDs are particularly challenging. So here we use 4 different approaches to try to resolve them. Typically, MLPA will identify canonical PTDs and then provide you with a trisomy state where applicable. MLPA is not a good strategy to detect other type of PTDs. So if exon 4 is not involved, you may have a false negative result. And it's not designed to detect other type of KMT2A rearrangement, though it may provide you with some type of information. We were able to obtain concordant results for both of our NGS approaches. And then, so NGS will allow the detection of canonical PTDs. So in this case, anything between exon 1 and 10. We were also able to detect other type of PTDs, so non-canonical PTDs using NGS. NGS is particularly good with, PTD sizing, but, it wasn't designed, at least the way we designed it, we were not really using this to detect the trisomy 11, and then we know that NGS may fail to identify other type of KMT2A rearrangement. OGT, optical genomic mapping, however, showed a better performance for the detection of canonical PTDs, other type of PTDs. PTD sizing is a lot more challenging using optical genomic mapping because of the lower resolution, and this type of information may be important when it comes to determining the meaning of the PTDs involved. So none of those 4 approaches are perfectly tailored for the detection of PTDs, and that's really the take-home message here. This is a challenging type of genetic genomic alteration, and it gets even more complicated. So when we started this project, this was my vision of KMT2A PTD. I thought that, it would just involve like a simple duplication between exon 2 to 10 of the gene, but there's now more and more evidence showing that the more complex PTD is happening out there. And then I think that, NGS it will definitely help, resolving this type of complex rearrangement. And this is a pretty cool review using NGS, and they showed that the other type of more complex PTD rearrangement, double gain of PTDs in the presence of copy-node LOH, and then other higher number of tandem duplication. And I think we were able to detect one using OGTs here. And it's just like to end my part of the presentation, thanking all the people that helped with this project, including my colleague Adam Smith, and I'm happy to take questions that I have. Thank you.